And I run for not letting my friend use the photographer she refused to split with me. I recently finished my doctoral degree in the United States. I am an international student, and unfortunately my family could not afford to travel for the graduation ceremony, so I attended alone. A few months before graduation, I asked my close friend and roommate, who was also graduating, if she wanted to split the cost of hiring a professional photographer together. She told me it was unnecessary and a waste of money. Since I knew I would not have family there, I later asked if her family could at least take a few pictures of me and my friend during the ceremony so I would have something to send home to my parents. She said they would be focused on her and would not really have time. During graduation, a representative from my country's consulate attended to congratulate students from our country. He asked if I needed anything, and I mentioned that I just hoped to get a few decent photos for my parents. He then contacted the consulate's media photographer, who came over and started taking some photos and short videos of me. As soon as my friend noticed, she ran over and started asking if he could also record her walking across the stage and do a full photo session with her parents, advisor, and friends. I told her she was welcome to ask him herself, but I did not feel comfortable requesting that on her behalf because I had not hired him personally. He worked for the consulate and was there for official reasons, not as a private photographer. She became angry, accused me of being selfish, and walked away. Later that evening she sent me a message and invited me from the graduation celebration we had been planning together for weeks. She said I ruined her graduation day and that she no longer felt comfortable having me there. Now I am wondering if I handled the situation badly. Was I wrong for not asking the photographer to include her after she previously refused to split the cost of hiring one with me? Am I wrong for stopping financial support from my grandfather after I found out he secretly gave the apartment to my aunt? My grandfather had a stroke almost 2 years ago, and after leaving the hospital he could no longer safely live completely independently. He was still mobile, but his memory had declined badly. He would forget things on the stove, leave the gas running, and sometimes call me in the middle of the night because he thought strangers were inside the apartment. I live about 20 minutes away, so most responsibilities gradually became mine. I handled doctor appointments, medications, paperwork, grocery shopping, transportation, and emergencies. Eventually, I hired a caregiver to help several days each week because things became too difficult for one person to manage alone. His pension covered part of the costs, but post-stroke medications and proper caregiving were expensive, so I regularly paid a large amount from my own income. Some months I spent the equivalent of over $1,000 helping him. The rest of the family barely helped. My aunt would occasionally visit with groceries, take photos with him, post online about family, and disappear again. My cousins almost never came around. I honestly believed the apartment would eventually be left to me. My grandfather had repeatedly told me that I was the only one consistently helping him and that things would be fair in the future. I even gave up plans to move to another city because I knew he depended heavily on me. To be clear, I never believed he was required to leave me the apartment. What hurt was finding out that decisions had already been made behind my back while everyone continued letting me believe we were being honest with each other. A few weeks ago, I came home earlier than usual and overheard my aunt talking with my grandfather in the kitchen. She was telling him not to leave the apartment to me because I was only helping for personal gain. She argued that she had children, debts, and a real family to think about. My grandfather agreed with her. That was when I learned he had already transferred ownership of the apartment to her 6 months earlier. Nobody told me. During all that time, I continued paying for caregivers and medications because I thought at least we were all being transparent with each other. I did not argue with Yale. I simply told my aunt that if the apartment legally belonged to her now, then responsibility for its guests should also belong to her. I informed her that beginning next month I would stop paying for the caregiver and extra expenses. Now the family atmosphere is tense. Nobody directly says I am wrong, but people keep making comments like, "He is an old man, why are you counting money?" And "You should not treat family this way over inheritance." Now I genuinely do not know how to feel. Part of me feels manipulated and taken advantage of. Another part of me worries that maybe I really do look like someone who only helped because I expected the apartment one day. Am I wrong for stepping back financially after finding out the apartment had secretly been given to my aunt? Am I wrong for not wanting to take care of my sister's 4 children while she gives birth? My wife and I live in a small 2-bedroom apartment with our 2 children who are both elementary school age and already share 1 bedroom. Space is tight as it is. My sister is pregnant with her 5th child and recently asked if I could take care of her 4 children while she is in the hospital giving birth and then keep them for an additional day afterward as well. Her children are ages 12, 10, 8 and 2. I told her honestly that I did not think it would work well in our apartment. Between the limited space, our own children, and my work schedule during the week, it would place a lot of pressure on my wife. My sister responded by telling me I should just take time off work or let all the children squeeze together for sleeping arrangements because it would only be temporary. I still told her no because I genuinely do not think we can realistically accommodate 6 children and 2 adults comfortably in our apartment for multiple days. She became upset and said she was stressed because she needed dependable childcare. I asked why she could not use her regular babysitter since she already has one. She admitted she did not want to spend the money and also wanted an extra day alone at home with her husband and the new baby before the older children returned. I apologized, but I still said no. She kept trying to convince me and eventually became angry, saying I was her only nearby family member and that family is supposed to help each other. It has now been 2 days without hearing from her, which is unusual because we normally talk every day. Also, before anyone suggests it, staying at her house is apparently not an option because she specifically wants the second day alone at home with her husband and newborn without the other children there. Am I wrong for refusing to take in her 4 children under these circumstances? Am I wrong for refusing to give my mother money every month? My mother recently told me and my 2 siblings that she expects each of us to give her the equivalent of about $300 every month for her retirement. According to her, supporting her financially is our responsibility as her children. Under different circumstances, I probably would not have an issue helping. But the part that bothers me is that she is not struggling financially. She owns several rental properties that bring in more income every month than most of us earn from our jobs. All 3 of us are in our 30s and have our own families to support. My sisters are stay-at-home mothers, so realistically their husbands would be the ones paying this money each month. I asked my mother if she gives her own parents monthly payments like this. She said no, although she has occasionally given them money when needed. I also pointed out that we are all trying to raise children during a difficult economy with high living costs. Her response was that $300 is not that much. If for context, the average monthly salary where we live is around $1,000. I told her I could never imagine demanding fixed monthly payments from my own children while they were trying to build their own lives and raise families. She responded by saying that children have a duty to take care of their parents. To be fair, my parents did spend a significant amount of money on our education growing up. We all attended private schools, and because of that I now have a relatively stable job that pays above average. Still, this feels less like support and more like entitlement to me. Another important detail is that we are Asian, so there is definitely a cultural expectation of helping parents financially as they age. However, neither my father nor any of my in-laws ask for this kind of monthly payment. My father has his own retirement savings. My mother does not. What worries me is the long-term expectation. If every parent expected several $100s every month from their adult children, many people would end up financially supporting multiple sets of parents while also trying to raise children of their own. Am I wrong for refusing to give my mother monthly payments even though culturally it is somewhat expected? Did I go too far by not telling my parents I was in the hospital? I live a few hours away from my parents who are both in their late 50s. Overall, we have a solid relationship. I visit during holidays, we call regularly, and we generally get along well. The one ongoing issue that has frustrated me for years is how impossible they are to reach by phone. Neither of them treats their cell phone like an actual communication device. They constantly leave them in random rooms, accidentally mute them, or let the batteries die for entire days. Sometimes I call over and over with no response until many hours later. I've brought it up repeatedly because they no longer even have a home phone. Their cell phones are literally the only way anyone can contact them. Every time I mention it, they laugh it off or act like I'm overreacting. I've told them before, what if there's an emergency? But they never take it seriously. About a month ago, I got extremely sick from food poisoning and ended up admitted to the hospital for nearly a week. It was awful, although not life-threatening. During the first couple of days there, I tried calling both of my parents multiple times. No answer at all. Eventually, I learned one phone had died and the other had apparently been left somewhere around the house. At that point, I got irritated and stopped trying. To be clear, I easily could have contacted my aunt, who lives nearby and talks to them often. She absolutely would have passed the message along immediately. But after years of dealing with the same issue, part of me felt like maybe this was the natural consequence of never answering their phones. So I chose not to tell anyone else. Yesterday, during a normal conversation with my mother, I casually mentioned that I had spent a week in the hospital last month. She panicked and immediately became upset that I had never informed them. I explained that I had tried reaching them several times but couldn't get through. She said I still should have contacted my aunt because a hospitalization counts as an emergency. I admitted that I could have done that, but I intentionally didn't because I wanted them to finally understand why being unreachable all the time is a problem. That made her even angrier. She accused me of deliberately using my hospitalization to teach them a lesson and said I caused unnecessary hurt and worry. My father thinks both of us are being stubborn about it. I honestly did not think it was that serious because I recovered completely and was never in actual danger, but now I'm second guessing whether I handled this immaturely just to make a point. I refused to put back heartburn medicine at a gas station while pregnant. I'm 26 and currently about 5 months pregnant. Lately the acid reflux has been brutal. Some days it feels like I'm breathing fire, especially at night or after eating anything greasy. The other evening my boyfriend and I went out for dinner at a little diner known for heavy comfort food. Before we even arrived, I could already feel the heartburn starting. Since most pharmacies were already closed, I asked him to stop at a gas station so I could grab something for it. The station only had individual travel packs of the medicine instead of full bottles. Since I've been dealing with reflux almost daily, I figured it made sense to stock up a bit so I could keep some in my purse, some in my boyfriend's car, and some at home. I took around 10 of the single packets from the display box, leaving several behind. When we got to the register, the cashier immediately asked if I had left any in the box. I told him yes, and he actually walked over to check. Apparently, he didn't think I left enough because he started complaining that he uses the medication regularly himself. My boyfriend apologized and quietly suggested I could maybe put a few back, but I said no. I explained that I genuinely needed them and that this has become an everyday problem for me lately. The cashier stopped arguing, but he clearly looked annoyed. My boyfriend then mentioned that I'm pregnant, which sort of ended the conversation. We paid and left. Once we got back to the car though, my boyfriend asked if I really needed to take that many. In my mind, 10 small packets didn't seem excessive because I usually need 2 at a time and I wanted extras available so I wouldn't get stuck without any again. Now I'm wondering if I was being inconsiderate for taking most of what was there, or if it was reasonable given the situation. Did I cross the line by changing my sister's kids' routine while they live with me? My sister and her 3 children recently moved into my home temporarily while she gets back on her feet. I'm not a parent myself, but I've been spending most of my time at home with the kids while she works and goes out more often. From what I've observed, the kids are almost always on their phones or tablets. They stay up until around 11 at night, even on school nights, and in the mornings they seem exhausted. The oldest, who is around 12 years old, often looks tired with dark circles under her eyes, and the younger 2 are frequently irritable or emotional. I brought it up to my sister and suggested that they might benefit from a more structured routine, earlier bedtimes, and less screen time, especially since school starts early in the morning. She told me they are fine and dismissed my concerns. Since I've been the one at home with them most of the time, I started making some changes on my own. I limited the screen time, encouraged them to do other activities, bought art supplies for the younger child who really enjoyed them, and started taking the oldest child on short walks around the building with music. Over time, she actually started choosing to go on longer walks herself. I also started enforcing earlier bedtimes while they are in my care. The younger kids now go to bed around 8 and the oldest between 9 and 10. My sister found out and told me I was overstepping because her children normally go to bed at 11 and that my rules don't apply to them. I told her that while they are in my home and I am caring for them, I believe the routine I've put in place has been working better. She became upset and brought it up to other family members. Now several of them are saying I should apologize for interfering and that I'm not respecting her role as their mother. I feel like I was acting in their best interest based on what I was seeing every day, but I also understand she is their parent and I may have crossed a boundary by changing things without her agreement. So now I'm wondering if I went too far by stepping in instead of leaving it entirely up to her. Did I ruin a gym member's reputation without meaning to? A few weeks ago, I signed up a fitness club in Manchester. It's one of those upscale places with extras like a sauna, plunge pool, and steam suites. The steam area only operates certain evenings, and you have to ask reception to switch it on before using it. One night around 9:30 after finishing my workout, I asked the front desk employee if the steam room was available. He told me it was already running because 2 other members were inside. I'm not particularly bothered by locker room nudity or anything like that, so I didn't think much of it. Usually people just sit quietly with towels wrapped around themselves. But the moment I walked in, I realized these 2 men were not just relaxing in there. They were kissing very intensely and clearly getting far more physical than anyone would expect in a shared gym facility. I immediately backed out because it felt awkward and intrusive. When I came back toward the lobby, the receptionist laughed and asked why I gave up so quickly. I casually replied something along the lines of, "I think those 2 want the room to themselves tonight." I honestly meant it as a harmless joke and didn't think anything of it afterward. The next evening, one of the men approached me near the weights area looking furious. He said my comment had exposed him to the staff and that word had spread around the gym. Apparently he had built this very macho image for himself and hung around with a group of guys obsessed with hyper-masculine bro culture. According to him, they had started mocking him non-stop after hearing what happened. He told me I had basically destroyed his reputation there and that he was now planning to cancel his membership because everyone was treating him differently. The other guy involved reacted completely differently. He apologized for making things uncomfortable in the steam room and admitted they probably shouldn't have been acting that way in a public area where anyone could walk in unexpectedly. Now I feel conflicted. I never intended to expose anyone's private life, and I certainly didn't expect my offhand comment to spread around the building. At the same time, I also feel like I walked into an uncomfortable situation that shouldn't have been happening in a communal space to begin with. Now I'm wondering whether I handled the whole thing badly or whether this situation spiraled far beyond what anyone could reasonably expect. Did I embarrass my roommate by using the neighbor's bathroom? I live in a university dorm room that I share with another student who I'll call Emma. We only have one bathroom between us. The issue is that Emma spends an extremely long time in the bathroom every day. It usually happens multiple times a day and can last anywhere from 30 minutes to over an hour each time. From what I've seen, she often smokes, scrolls through shows on her phone, and does her full skincare routine in there. Every time she comes out, she apologizes and says she doesn't know why she does it, but then the same pattern repeats. After a while, I stopped bringing it up because it never really changed anything. A few days ago, Emma went into the bathroom again while I had just had several cups of tea. About half an hour passed and I needed to use the bathroom. I assumed she would be out soon, but she stayed in. I knocked and asked how long she needed, and she said about 15 more minutes. I told her I really needed to go urgently, and she apologized again and repeated that she would be quick. Another 30 minutes went by and she was still inside. At that point I was genuinely uncomfortable and desperate. I knocked again, and she once more said she needed about 15 more minutes. I realized I could not wait any longer. I left our room and went to a nearby dorm room to ask if I could use their bathroom because mine was still occupied. The person who lives there is someone I know from classes, and he let me in without issue. The next day, Emma seemed upset when she got home, but initially said nothing. When I asked her later, she told me she was angry because I had embarrassed her by telling other people she was in the bathroom for so long, and now people were joking about it. I didn't think I had done anything wrong at the time because I was just explaining why I needed to urgently use another bathroom. I was honestly more focused on how uncomfortable I felt in the moment than how it might come across. Now I'm wondering if I should have handled it more privately instead of mentioning the situation when I asked my neighbour for help. Did I go too far telling my sister to stop giving my daughter gifts with conditions? I recently got into a disagreement with my sister over something that started out very small but escalated quickly. Years ago, she bought my daughter a pool toy when she was younger. My daughter outgrew it, so I eventually donated it during a routine clear out of old toys and baby items. Out of nowhere, my sister messaged me asking if I still had it. I told her I had already donated it because my daughter hadn't used it in a long time. That's when she said she thought she had previously told me to save anything she buys for my daughter and not give it away, and that going forward she wants me to check with her before getting rid of anything she purchases. I was honestly confused because I only clearly remember her mentioning that once, and even then it was about a specific item, not a general rule for everything she has ever gifted. From there, the conversation escalated. She started listing all the things she has bought for my daughter over the years and expressed frustration that some of those items were no longer in use or had been donated. To me, it started to feel like those gifts were being retroactively turned into something I owe her accountability for. That immediately hit a nerve for me. I grew up in a household where gifts and help were often used later as a way to guilt or control, with constant reminders of everything we've done for you. Because of that, I'm very sensitive about anything that even remotely feels like emotional debt being attached to generosity. I told her that if gifts come with conditions, expectations, or future control over how they're used, then I would rather she not buy things for my daughter at all. I also said that my daughter shouldn't grow up feeling like she owes people for normal childhood gifts. My sister thinks I completely overreacted and that she was only asking to be told before sentimental items get donated. From her point of view, she just wants the option to keep meaningful things. From my perspective, it's not realistic to expect me to store or track every single item someone buys for my child indefinitely, especially when kids outgrow things constantly and we regularly declutter. Now the conversation is tense, and I feel bad that it escalated, but I still feel strongly about the principle of not tying gifts to long-term obligations. So I'm wondering if I took this too far or if I was right to set that boundary. Did I ruin a family visit by changing my mind about a sleepover? I'm currently in the middle of a very stressful exam period for law school, and I also have 2 young children to look after. My husband's relatives are visiting from abroad, and they have been staying at a large countryside home outside the city. Over the past few weeks, we have already made several trips there to spend time with them, and during one of those visits we casually said they were welcome to come see us in the city as well. Last night, very late in the evening, they suddenly announced that they planned to drive up the next day and stay overnight at our house. The problem is that nothing about our situation is ready for guests. The house is messy, I have an early morning appointment to take one of my children to the dentist, and I desperately need quiet time to study. I suggested they come the following day instead for lunch so we could prepare properly, and I made it clear that hosting a sleepover on such short notice would not work for me. My husband did not give them a direct answer. Instead, he kept things vague and commented that the house was not in great shape but did not actually say no. Later, during a phone call with his sister, he put the call on speaker, and when she directly asked if they could stay over, he physically handed me the phone. I felt completely put on the spot. I did not want to reject them directly in that moment in front of everyone, especially after my husband had already left the decision open, so I awkwardly agreed to them staying over even though I was already overwhelmed. As soon as the call ended, I told my husband I was upset. I felt like he had avoided taking responsibility and instead placed me in a position where I had to either agree or be the one to disappoint his family. I told him it felt unfair and that he should have clearly said no earlier instead of letting it get to that point. I then asked him to call them back, explain the situation, and cancel the overnight stay because I could not realistically manage it right now. Now I feel torn. I do not want to come across as rude or inconsiderate, especially since this is one of their last chances to visit before travelling back abroad. At the same time, I feel overwhelmed, exhausted, and frustrated that I was put in a position where I felt pressured into agreeing in the first place. So I am wondering if I handled this poorly by changing my answer after already saying yes. My son wanted me to hand over a blanket meant for my stillborn grandchild. About 8 years ago, I made handmade quilts for each of my grandchildren when they were born. They were large enough for a twin bed, and every one of them took me weeks to finish. Sewing was always my thing, and I love putting time into something personal for each child. Most of the grandkids still sleep with theirs or keep them on their beds. The last quilt I completed was around 6 years ago, and even then it was difficult because my arthritis had started getting bad in my hands. Since then, sewing for long periods has become painful enough that I mostly stopped. My son got remarried earlier this year. His wife is a 10-year-old daughter named Chloe. She's a kind kid, and I've always been polite and welcoming toward her. A few weeks ago, my son asked if I could make Chloe one of the same quilts I made for the other grandchildren. I explained that physically I just can't do it anymore. My hands cramp badly, and even basic sewing projects are difficult now. He then asked if I could give Chloe an unused quilt I still have stored away. The quilt he meant was one I made years ago for my daughter's baby. My daughter lost the baby late in the pregnancy, and the blanket was never used. I kept it packed away because emotionally I never felt right giving it away. To me, it was made for that child specifically. I told him no. I said it would feel deeply wrong to hand that quilt to someone else, especially after what happened. I thought that would be the end of it. Instead, my daughter-in-law called me furious. She accused me of refusing to accept Chloe as a real grandchild and said I should be making more of an effort. She repeated that since I would not sew a new quilt, I should at least give Chloe the unused one sitting in storage. I explained again that the issue was not Chloe. I physically cannot make another quilt, and the old one carries painful memories connected to my daughter's loss. She told me I was being unfair and treating Chloe differently from the other grandchildren. Then my son called later and said if I would not do this one thing, I should not expect to be involved with the kids very much moving forward. Now I'm upset too. I understand why Chloe may feel left out seeing the other grandchildren with handmade quilts, but I also feel like people are ignoring both my physical limitations and the emotional significance of that particular blanket. Now I'm wondering if I'm being unreasonable for refusing to give it away. I told my mother I refused to let my son endure the racism I grew up around. My mother is white and my father is black. They divorced when I was very young, and I was mostly raised around my mother's side of the family. Growing up, racism was something I dealt with constantly from certain relatives. Some family members made jokes or little comments they thought were harmless. Others were much more blatant. One of my uncles openly used racial slurs without shame. I'm mixed race, but people do not always immediately recognize me as black unless I wear my natural hair a certain way. Even so, the comments still happened regularly toward me and my brothers. The part that hurt most was that my mother never really stopped it. She usually stayed quiet, brushed it off, or acted like confronting them would just create drama. As kids, we basically learned to sit there and tolerate it because nobody was going to defend us. Now I'm 30 and pregnant with my first child. My partner is black, so our son will very likely be clearly perceived as black by most people. Recently, I was talking with my mother about eventually coming home for the holidays after the baby is born so extended family could meet my partner and our son. During that conversation, I told her very clearly that if anyone makes racist comments toward my child or my partner, we will immediately leave. No discussion, no second chances in the moment, just gone. I explained that I am not willing to let my son grow up accepting the same treatment my brothers and I had to endure. My mother got very emotional and said my comment basically implied she had been a terrible mother. I told her I was not trying to attack her, but honestly, I do believe parents should protect their children from racist behavior, even when it comes from relatives. She started crying and said, I guess I was just the worst mother in the world then. Now I feel conflicted because I was trying to establish boundaries for my own child, not destroy my mother emotionally. At the same time, I also feel like pretending my childhood experiences were acceptable would be dishonest. For context, not everyone on my mother's side behaves this way. It is a large extended family, and only certain relatives are openly racist. The issue is that the family still gathers together for major holidays, and everyone attends, including the people who caused problems growing up. My partner and I currently live abroad in a very small place, so hosting visiting relatives ourselves is not realistic, which is part of why we were considering travelling there instead. Still, I cannot shake the feeling that if I do bring my son around those relatives, it is my responsibility to protect him in ways I was not protected myself. Would I be wrong for blocking my ex from leaving the country over unpaid child support? My former partner, Daniel, that I separated about 7 years ago after a relationship that involved a lot of financial manipulation and controlling behaviour. During our marriage, I was the sole income earner while also handling nearly all of the parenting responsibilities. Daniel's main contribution was school and daycare drop-offs. Beyond that, I managed everything else: bills, budgeting, grocery orders, meal planning, appointments, school communication, and the general mental load of running a household. I even hired a cleaner because there simply weren't enough hours in the day. After the divorce, Daniel eventually found work and was earning roughly what I made. Over the past 7 years, though, his involvement with the children has steadily declined. On average, he's only spent about 8% of the time with them. At one point, he saw them just 13 times across a 2-year period, entirely by his own choice. Despite that, I worked hard to preserve the children's relationship with his side of the family. His relatives all live overseas, and I still regularly take the children there for several weeks each year so they can stay connected to their grandparents, language, and cultural traditions. I actually visit his home country more often than he does because I built friendships and connections there during the years we lived abroad together. Now the children live with me full time. Daniel recently stopped working altogether, has stopped paying child support, and is currently trying to pursue shared custody through the courts. At this point he owes around 6 months of support payments. Technically I can survive without the money, but things are tight. I'm budgeting carefully, and upcoming private school fees will likely have to come out of my mortgage line of credit if this continues. Legally, I have the option to request a travel restriction order because of the unpaid support debt. If approved, he would not be allowed to leave the country until the debt is paid. Realistically, either he or his very wealthy parents would likely settle the amount immediately. The complication is that his entire family lives overseas, including elderly grandparents who are close to 100 years old. If one of them passed away while the restriction was active, he could miss the funeral and important cultural mourning traditions connected to it. For what it's worth, I would still take the children overseas for any funeral or family emergency, and I already keep emergency travel funds available for that exact reason. Part of me feels justified because he has ignored both his financial responsibilities and much of his parental role for years. Another part of me feels guilty because I know this could seriously affect his ability to say goodbye to family members near the end of their lives. So now I'm torn over whether enforcing the order would simply be holding him accountable, or whether it would cross a line morally.